Okay, so in this video we're going to discuss how do you solve quadratics by factoring. And we've done this a little bit, so it's a little bit of a review, but it's a good refresher. So here's a couple examples of two quadratic equations, and we want to be able to solve both of them, and we're going to use the factoring technique. So when we're factoring, what's that first rule, the cardinal rule of factoring? We're always looking for something. What is it? We're always looking for GCF. If you can pull out a GCF, it often makes your life easier. Okay, so then, if there are two terms or if there's three terms, then it's not going to be more than three terms if we're talking about a quadratic function, because if it were, it wouldn't be quadratic, or it could be simplified into three terms. So if there are two terms, you're thinking probably a difference of squares. And if there are three terms, you're thinking about reverse FOIL or unfoil. Okay, so how do you solve by factoring? If you have a quadratic equation, which means I'm not going to have any exponent on my variable that is greater than 2. I want to solve it, and I want to solve it by factoring. You're going to set it equal to 0. So the very first thing we're going to do is set this equal to 0. So 2x squared plus 15x minus 8 is equal to 0. Okay, now I'm going to look and see if I see a GCF. 2, 15, 8, nope, I don't see anything that goes into all three of them. Okay, so then I'm thinking to myself, how do I take this product, negative 16x squared, and break it into two-term factors that add to make 15x? And so I believe that would be 16x and minus 1x. If I add these together, I get the 15x. If I multiply them together, I get the negative 16x squared. So I've got 2x squared plus 16x minus x minus 8. And now I can take this and factor it by grouping, right? So let's take these first two terms and factor out our GCF of those. And I think that ends up being x and then plus 8 here. Keep this minus here. And then I look at x and 8. What's the GCF there? Just a 1. So now if I divide a negative 1 out of a negative x, I get x. If I divide a negative 1 out of a negative 8, I get positive 8. And when I factor by grouping, that binomial should be the same. So now I'm looking at this thing, and I'm factoring out the GCF of these two, units, and that would end up being x plus 8. X plus 8 times 2x minus 1. And that is all equal to 0. Take those two factors and apply the zero product property, which says if two things multiplied together get 0, then one of them at least has got to be 0. So let's say x plus 8 equals 0. So x here has got to equal negative 8. 2x minus 1 equals 0. So x here would have to be 1/2. So in almost all quadratic equations, we're going to get two answers. And our answers here are negative 8 and 1/2. In this situation, we have a quadratic that's two terms, and we always start by looking for that GCF. We have it already set equal to 0, so it is set up for us to go ahead and solve. So let's go ahead and start by factoring out a GCF, which we know 5x goes into both of these terms. So 5x squared divided by 5x, that gives me x, and 20x divided by 5x is 4. So I have, I'm done factoring. Right, so now I've got these two factors which are equal 0, and so I'm going to take each of them and set them equal to 0. 5x is equal to 0, and x plus 4 is also equal to 0. Solve each of them for x, and here we would find that x is equal to 0, while here x is equal to negative 4. So our solution set here, 0 and negative 4. couple of examples for you to model as you work some of these problems.